What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be delving into my off-season stack. The time has finally come. We know that we've got about 20-25 pounds of mass to add over the next couple of years. So with that in mind, shit's about to get serious. We're after that IFBB Pro card at the end of the day. It's the long-term goal, and to do that, might just take a little bit more than last time. So we'll start the video off with a little bit of context about my Anabolics history. For those of you who are new to the channel, this should give you a bit of an insight into where I am, and for those of you who are returning, then we'll go for a bit of a recap. So my first cycle, can you guess? I used to hang out on Reddit. What do you think it was? Yeah, it was testosterone and Anfate 500 milligrams per week. Of course, the basic bitch first cycle. Glad that I did it. You know, it gave me an idea of estrogen management, but equally I could have gotten away with a lot less and not had to deal with those worries. Still getting some quality mass. So what did we do for the second cycle? Do we drop that down? Do we get a bit more sensible? Nope. We added another compound, and of course, you know, eager to try the full anabolic spectrum, we delved into the best compound I judged at the time for an off-season or a bulk to avoid 19 NORs. And that was testosterone and equipoise. So equipoise is the horse steroid, which I've gone into in another video. But that was a bulk, 600 milligrams of each, and that was my last off-season. Now moving on from the off-season cycle. So we grew, we got fat, we got fatter. Finally decided I wanted to take the plunge and compete. So we recruited Josh basically in January of this year, I believe. And it was a few months working with him until we actually jumped on anything. We stayed at basically cruise doses for probably about 4 or 5 months there. So a decent period of the cut. But once we finally did engage the stack, the cycle at its peak got up to 300 milligrams of testosterone per week and 450 milligrams of primo. That was it. And I'd say we got pretty shredded. So, you know, obviously we've been able to keep things fairly conservative leading up to this point. The second off-season stack was probably a bit overkill. To be honest, I could have reaped the same benefits from doing a low-dose EQ and a mildly dosed testosterone. That would have given me the performance benefits of equipoise without having to worry too much about the added side effects. But you live, you learn, and we're obviously taking that into this off-season. But the important thing, what were the numbers? You know, what did I do last time around? Well, we started the off-season at 196 pounds and we ended it at 212. That's about 16 pounds that we added. That was decent, and that was, you know, factoring in the amount of water weight we lost as we came off, which wasn't actually significant after the equipoise. So, you know, a decent old jump there, but I did have a bad diet. I had minimal exercise because lockdown was a thing at that point. You know, we were floor pressing about 80 kilograms or 60 kilograms even, and that was basically all that I could do. As I mentioned, we used equipoise because we were avoiding 19 NORs. There's a bit of a fear about them really through my mind for a while, just because of obviously the trend horror stories, and it did make a suitable replacement. Decent amount of mass, but it was a bit tricky to run for average results, I'd say. So let's compare that to this time. Where are we starting this off-season? Well, I'm starting this off-season at 196 pounds, so the same way. But you'll see here the difference between my 196 pounds then and now. This is a full body recomposition. Whoever says that you can't, you know, gain mass during a deficit, well, just look at the last sort of 8 months of my progress. It was pretty substantial, given the fact that for most of the time we were in some form of deficit. Now, there was a lot of mass added during the off-season, sure, but not enough given my body composition at the time. Currently, I'd estimate I'm about 12% body fat, so that's reasonable, that's moderate. We're not looking to really increase that too substantially over this off-season. We're not dirty bulking. We're keeping it controlled because we have 2 years ahead of gaining mass, and that's a lot of time to go astray and off the path and lose control of it. So we need to make sure that we're actively managing our composition, and we're going to try and sort of, I guess you'd call it, a clean bulk. So I mentioned 19 NORs and my desire to avoid them. Let's talk about that. 19 NORs are some of the most controversial drugs in bodybuilding or in the whole anabolics world, really. They are notoriously hard on your body, ranging from neurotoxicity through to obviously liver stress and general organ stress. And metabolites also stick around in your body for quite a long period of time, similar to equipoise. So, you know, that suggests that the exposure to the negative side effects could potentially be quite long term compared to other compounds, which may be in and out of your system relatively quickly. That means that there's potentially a high toxicity and it lasts a decent period of time. not really adding up to be a pretty picture so far, right? But they are also the most effective. Dandelone is a historically loved compound by the bodybuilding world for building mass. You'll probably know it under the other name of deca-durabolin. That is the longer ester version of nandrolone, so that, is in and out of your system a little bit longer than something short-acting, such as an NPP. It's the same with tren. There is a tren enanthate and a tren ace. Tren ace is shorter acting, tren enanthate is longer acting. So different people tend to agree with different versions of these compounds, if I'm honest. There seems to be very wide-ranging experience from people saying that they can't take an enanthate because it sends them crazy, but they're fine with ACE, and the same with DECA and MPP. Tren is also a staple in most preps for its protein-sparing effects and lots of other reasons. So they really do have their upsides, and it's about balancing the risk and reward and figuring out which one may work for you if you do decide to delve into that world. My goal is an IFBB Pro card. It's a lofty ambition, and I know that I'm not there yet by any means. We've stripped my physique bare though. We know what we have to do. We have quality mass to add. And in my eyes, the risk-reward ratio might have just flipped. So let's get into the juicy bits, the proper information that you've been waiting for. What am I taking? Well, I'm going to be taking testosterone and enanthate. Of course I am. It's going to be in pretty much every cycle that I run. Testosterone is simply used as a base, as we know. Then I'm going to be taking primobolan, of course, the favourite. Bringing it back from the prep, we're going to be taking MPP. So this is the shorter acting version of DECA. It's fast acting nandrolone, and it is one of the 19 laws that in my eyes made the most sense. But that's not it for new compounds. We're going to be introducing something completely different in the form of HGH. So we all know growth hormone. It's fabled, right? Slow, consistent, progressive gains, hair, skin, nails, lifestyle benefits, increased recovery, increased, rest capabilities. It seems to be a star, and for good reason. Now, I'm not going to give the doses of everything because I do know that there's a propensity for people to take that away and just implement it straight off the bat, and everybody is different. These doses have been specifically decided on between myself and my coach, based on my personal physique. But I can assure you that in terms of anabolics, I'm still well under a gram a week. So why am I taking these compounds? Why do I decide to take what I take? Well, testosterone is just the base of a cycle. Helps to keep aromatization, estrogen present. It helps to keep mood there and stuff when your natural testosterone is suppressed. You need something to mimic the natural testosterone, and nothing does that quite like testosterone. Primobolan, now I shouldn't really need to tell you why I'm using this. It is safe, mild, consistent, reliable, low side effects, and it's well tolerated in women above a gram a week in studies. Now, granted, those studies have flaws, but the point of the matter is still, this is a pretty beautiful compound to run if you can afford it. NPP. So I guess this is why you'll be tuning in really, to see what made me change my mind. Well, NPP is highly anabolic, low aromatization, hair safe, and it's good for joints, which is always good during the off season because we're going to start to push weight. And of course, it really helps to have stuff in there which helps with performance. HGH, well, it's a whole new pathway to manipulate for growth. We are manipulating the AAS, the androgen pathway to a certain extent. This is another one that you can manipulate and should bring in earlier rather than later, really, because it means that you don't have to overload one pathway, the androgen receptor, to grow. You can actually, utilize multiple different channels, and overall it will generally be safer. And HGH is a beautifully safe compound that's been, around since God knows when. It helps you with your hair, skin, nails, helps you with your sleep. It can have multiple different uses depending on when you inject it, from fat loss to muscle building. And it has some great body composition effects, generally making it harder to put on fat and easier to lose it. Now, I understand you're probably going to be wanting to know a bit more about the new compounds that I'm running, the NPP and HGH. So, MPP is the faster acting version of DECA, as I've mentioned. That makes it easier to pull out if I do have any issues. And this is an important thing for me. When introducing a new compound, I try and think about what happens if it goes wrong. If I do not agree with MPP, for whatever reason, how can I get it out of my system quickest? Well, it would be choosing MPP over DECA, for example. or tren ace versus tren nanfate. Now, it does mean that it needs to be dosed more frequently, ideally every other day or every day, as frequently as you can dose it really. But it's the best option in my opinion for a beginner entering the world of 19 NORs. Tren is especially neurotoxic. It has some very individual drawbacks, which personally means that I'd rather go towards the Dandelone side than the Trenbolone side if I'm sort of being pushed down the channel of 19 NORs. Not to say that I'm being pushed in any way, this is a conscious decision. And HGH. The beautiful thing about HGH is that you run it year round. You don't need to cycle off. Now there is conflicting opinion about this, so there may be a need to take a break depending on how you take it and whether you're using stuff like metformin. But generally speaking, it's not something that you need to have any prolonged period of time away from. You don't need to cycle on and off like anabolics, and it's going to help you in all aspects. Recovery, hair, skin, nails, as I've mentioned. It is expensive, and there's a big argument about Pharma versus Underground Labs HGH. Let me just delve into this briefly for you. Pharmaceutical, for example, Pfizer, it is generally preferred by most bodybuilders. However, I believe the reason being for this is because a lot of the pharmaceutical brands, for example, add diuretics into it, which means that it reduces the amount of water retention that comes along with GH. And at higher doses, of course, that's going to be way more noticeable for somebody like a top pro who can maybe see way less water retention thinking, oh, good, this is how GH should work then because this is pharmaceutical. Whereas the generics don't come along with that added benefit. Generics do work. They absolutely do. Will you potentially reap more reward from Pharma? Potentially. It depends on what you get generic-wise. But the gear being faked, all this kind of discussion about, you know, the drawbacks of one side or the other based on, oh, this is always faked or this isn't. Both sides, pharmaceutical and generics, are faked frequently. So whether you're paying 100 and something pounds for 30 IUs or the same amount for 100, you've still got a similar chance of being screwed over. In my eyes, if you're taking the leap into this world for the first time of manipulating GH or taking it, personally, I don't see it warranted to spend £300 per month to try it. We've discussed the cycle, what we're using, why we're using it. Let's talk about the stuff that often is neglected, the ancillaries, the stuff we're taking alongside these compounds. So first of all is Telmisartan. It helps regulate blood pressure and is generally good for multiple purposes for health. This is something which is seen as non-negotiable by Josh for somebody cycling, and after a bit of research myself and a lot of praises throughout the bodybuilding world, I would happen to agree. Telmisartan is a cheap and available thing to run alongside your cycle to make sure that you're trying to mitigate some of the potential drawbacks of being an anabolics user. HCG I'm using for my sex life and to avoid atrophy. It's just a smart decision. At first I stopped using it because the dosing frequency was a bit annoying every other day. You know, it's a different type of injection and yeah, smashing through slim pins basically. But now that we're taking growth hormone, it just makes sense. They can be kept in the same thing. You know, I can just draw them at the same time. You know, it's quick, it's easy. Why not add it back into the stack? Now that may potentially bring a little more aromatization into play, but we need to obviously be aware of that and manage it as and where we go. I will also be taking P5P, that'll be prevention of prolactin issues from the MPP. That should do the job fairly well and avoid the need to use something like a CABA, although we're using a very mild dose, so it's doubtful that we would have to anyway. But there's one thing missing from that list, isn't there? Aromatize inhibitors. This cycle is designed to avoid aromatize inhibitors. AIs are pretty toxic on the body. They are not good for you. And especially modulating estrogen, you know, that harshly, can have many drawbacks. People frequently overstep the line and crush their E2 and think they've still got a high E2, so crush it even further. And a test dose alone, it won't really need an aromatase inhibitor. To be honest, what I'm taking, it won't. I've tested this, I know that it doesn't. And Primo has a mild AI effect, which seemed to work for me last cycle, so that should also help to balance it all out. My testosterone won't be rising considerably during the cycle, so we know that that really won't change too much as we go forward. And if needed, I can reactively dose Arimidex, but that would be it. I would reactively dose it for a period of time, then cut it out, because I don't want to be on an extended dose of Arimidex as a sort of fail-safe against gyno, when realistically with the doses I'm on, I'll have ample warning if that kind of thing is going to occur. So in summary, this is my most elaborate, expensive cycle so far. I'll be working with Josh through the off season, and we will likely be titrating these doses up over time. So they will be rising as we go along and as needs require. I just want to say as well, like, I'm not blindly going into this. I didn't just randomly follow advice. Like, we talked about the options, we talked about the 19 NORs, we talked about this kind of stuff. We didn't even have 19 NORs planned in my prep because I specifically said to Josh I wanted to avoid them. You know, so that's the kind of coach you want. Somebody who's not steadfast on this is the only way, you have to take this drug, because that clearly shows an over-reliance on compounds to get their athletes in shape. If they can't do it without something, well, loads of coaches can. So that's your problem, not the compounds or the athletes. This will be a transformation for the books. I'll be documenting the off-season as we go. I'll be delving into my diet next. We'll be giving you a full day of eating for mass. We're checking in with Josh tomorrow, actually. So we started the cycle as we got the bloods back and it all gave us the all clear. But that was a bit preemptively before check-ins. Check-ins will be where any diet changes come and anything changes with the schedule. But I've got to say, based on the back workout yesterday and the DOMs I'm feeling today, we've got some hard graft ahead, but it's going to pay off. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Catch you in the next one.